Some stories are born from imagination, and some are carried by whispers from those who lived them. What I'm about to share is not fiction. It is a memory that has refused to fade, no matter how many years have passed. A memory that returns every time the clock strikes midnight and I remember the last knock. I grew up in an ordinary house on an ordinary street. A narrow two-story home with cracked white paint on the wooden siding and a porch light that buzzed faintly whenever moths circled it at night. It was the kind of place that didn't draw attention. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. My parents worked long hours, and my little sister Hannah spent most of her evenings coloring in the living room while I tried to keep up with school assignments. Life was simple, predictable, and for a while, that's all I wanted it to be. But there are things you don't notice until they change. Small details you dismiss because they don't fit into your sense of normal. It started with sounds. At first, I thought they were part of the old house settling. Creaks in the floorboards, faint thuds against the walls. My father always said, "That's just the wood breathing." He laughed about it, telling me our house was alive, stretching its bones. But I remember one evening, sitting in my room, the pages of my textbook open in front of me, when I heard a knock. Not at the door, not on the window. It came from inside the walls. A hollow, deliberate tap, 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 like knuckles against plaster. I froze, my pencil hanging mid-air, and turned toward the sound. My window was shut, the curtains drawn. Hannah was in the living room, humming to herself, and my parents weren't home yet. I told myself it was pipes, just the old plumbing. But deep down, I knew it had a rhythm that didn't belong to plumbing. That night, while brushing my teeth, I noticed Hannah staring at the hallway wall. She was only 6, clutching her stuffed rabbit tight against her chest. "What are you looking at?" I asked. Her voice was small, almost a whisper. "The man in the wall," she said. I felt my stomach drop. "Don't be silly." I forced a laugh. "There's no man in the wall." She turned her head slowly toward me, her eyes wider than usual. "He knocks when you don't listen." I snapped at her to stop making up stories. It was late, and I was tired. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized how quiet the house had become. Too quiet. When the knock returned just past midnight, I buried my head under the blanket and told myself I imagined it. The next day, everything returned to normal. My parents made breakfast. Hannah giggled at cartoons. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, filling the room with warmth. I almost convinced myself that I had dreamed it. Almost. But on my way out the door for school, I noticed something strange. On the wooden frame of the front door, at about eye level, was a small, round indentation. Like someone had tapped the wood with their knuckles 3 times. And no one in the house claimed they had done it. I tried to ignore the strange knocks after that first week. Life has a way of burying unease under routine. School assignments, chores, and family dinners filled the spaces of my days, and for a while I told myself it had just been my imagination. But unease has a way of returning when the sun goes down. It was late one evening, when the air in the house felt heavier than usual. The kind of weight you can't see but you can feel pressing down on your chest. Hannah had already gone to bed, and my parents were watching TV in the living room, laughing at some late-night sitcom. Their voices sounded distant, like I was listening through a layer of glass. That's when I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. The same steady rhythm, coming from behind my bedroom wall. This time I forced myself to move closer. My palms were sweating, and my ears felt like they were straining to pick up the smallest sound. I pressed my hand against the cold plaster. For a second, I thought maybe it was nothing. Then, right beneath my fingertips, the knock came again, sharp, deliberate. I yanked my hand back. My first instinct was to run downstairs and tell my parents. But what could I say? That the walls were knocking at me. They'd laugh, the same way Dad laughed about the wood breathing. Still, I tried. "Dad," I said as I stood in the doorway to the living room, "have you ever heard knocking in the walls?" He barely glanced at me. "Pipes. House is old. Don't worry about it." My mom nodded without looking away from the TV. "You scare yourself too much. Try sleeping earlier." I wanted to argue, but their dismissal made me feel ridiculous. Like I was just a child making up ghost stories. But Hannah, she wasn't laughing. Later that night, I peeked into her room and saw her awake, staring at her wall again. The stuffed rabbit was clutched so tightly in her arms that the seams looked ready to split. "Hannah," I whispered, "what are you doing?" She didn't look at me. Her lips moved, soft and trembling. "He's listening," she said. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Who?" She finally turned, her eyes glassy and wet. The man in the wall. He wants to come in. I didn't know what to say. She was 6. Kids imagine things. But part of me wondered if maybe she wasn't imagining at all. That night I couldn't sleep. The air in my room felt different, as if the shadows had grown heavier, stretching long across the corners. I left the lamp on, even though I knew my parents would scold me in the morning. Just past midnight it happened again. The knocking, 3 sharp raps against the wall. But this time there was more. A sound, low and muffled, like a whisper pushing through layers of plaster. I pressed my ear closer, my body trembling. I couldn't make out words, but I knew it was a voice. My breath hitched. My heart hammered so loud I thought it might drown everything else out. And then silence. The house grew still again. The kind of silence where you know deep down that you're not alone. By morning, I had convinced myself it was a dream. It had to be. Maybe I was letting Hannah's stories get into my head. But when I got ready for school and went downstairs, I noticed something. On the hallway wall, faint and barely visible in the morning light, were 3 small scratches. Not deep enough to be from furniture or an accident. Thin, vertical marks, like fingernails dragging downward. I froze, staring at them until Hannah came bounding into the hallway. She stopped when she saw me staring. Without a word, she pressed her tiny hand against the wall, directly over the scratches. "They're not from us," she whispered. I wanted to argue to tell her she was wrong, but the words never made it past my throat. That day at school, I found it hard to concentrate. Every creak of the classroom ceiling, every shuffle in the hallway made me jump. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting something. But nothing came. When I told one of my friends about it, he laughed. "Dude, your house is just old. You're freaking yourself out." And maybe he was right. But why then? Did the knocks always come at midnight? Why did Hannah keep insisting she saw someone in the wall? That night, I lay awake, counting the minutes on my alarm clock. My parents were asleep. Hannah was quiet. The whole house felt like it was holding its breath. And when the red numbers on the clock flicked over to 1200, I heard it. Knock. Knock. This time it wasn't from the wall. It was from the front door. The night I heard the knocks at the front door, I didn't move. I lay frozen in bed, staring at the ceiling, my ears straining. The sound was deliberate. 3 knocks evenly spaced. I told myself Dad would answer. Or maybe Mom. But the house stayed silent. No footsteps. No voices. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the pounding of my own heartbeat. Minutes dragged on. My alarm clock ticked over to 12:03, then 12:04. Finally, I forced myself to get up. My legs trembled as I crept down the stairs, every step groaning under my weight. The living room was dark, shadows stretching across the furniture. I stopped in front of the door. Nothing. The porch light flickered, casting a pale orange glow across the yard. The street was empty. No cars. No people. No one standing at the door. I almost laughed in relief. Almost. Until I looked down. On the welcome mat pressed into the fabric were 3 damp circles, like the prints of knuckles. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Then I ran back upstairs, trying to convince myself it was just rain, or dirt, or something. But the air in my room was colder than before, and sleep never came. The next morning, I tried to tell my mom. She frowned as she buttered toast. "You're having nightmares," she said. "You're too tired. No more scary movies before bed." But I didn't watch anything. She cut me off. Then stopped thinking about it. "You'll drive yourself crazy." Adade barely looked up from his coffee. "It's the wind." "Forget it." They didn't see it. They didn't hear it. But Hannah did. She tugged on my sleeve as we walked to the bus stop that morning. "He was at the door last night, wasn't he?" I stared at her. "How do you know?" She shrugged, hugging her rabbit close. I heard him whispering. I stopped walking. "What did he say?" Her eyes darted away. "He said he's waiting for you." That night, I begged my parents to let me keep the hallway light on. They laughed, but Mom finally agreed. I still couldn't sleep. Every creak, every shift of the house made me flinch. Then, sometime past midnight, the whispers began. They weren't muffled this time. They seeped through the walls, low and guttural, just at the edge of understanding. I pressed my pillow over my head, but the sound wormed its way through, like it was inside me. I sat up, my throat dry, and whispered into the dark, "What do you want?" The room fell silent. I thought maybe I imagined it. Until I heard a slow drag across the wall, like fingers trailing down the plaster. I couldn't stay still. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut across my room, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw something in the corner. A shape. A figure crouched low, gone the moment the light hit it. My breath came in gasps. I blinked, but the corner was empty. Still, I knew I wasn't alone. The following days blurred, I stopped sleeping. My teachers noticed. My friends made jokes. Even my parents started looking at me differently. Worried, but annoyed. Only Hannah believed me. She'd started drawing pictures, scribbles in crayon that she taped to her wall. Figures with long arms, black eyes, crouching in corners. One night I found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing furiously. "Hannah, what are you doing?" She didn't look up. "He doesn't like when you don't talk to him," she said. My voice cracked. "Who doesn't?" She finally looked at me. Her drawing was of our front door. A figure stood outside it faceless, with one arm raised as if knocking. That night I had the first dream. I was standing in the hallway, the house silent, bathed in moonlight. My feet felt glued to the floor. At the end of the hallway was the front door. Someone was on the other side. I couldn't see them, but I knew. The knock came loud and sharp, reverberating through the house. And then a voice. Not a whisper this time. A deep, resonant tone that seemed to echo inside my skull. "Let me in." I woke up screaming. For the first time, my parents looked scared. My dad rushed into the room, gripping my shoulders, asking if I was okay. My mom stood pale in the doorway, clutching her robe. But even then, they didn't believe. "You're overtired," Mom said, shaking. "It's just stress. School, lack of sleep." Dad interrupted. "Enough. No more of this nonsense." But he couldn't hide it. I saw it in his eyes. He was afraid too. As they left the room, I caught Hannah peeking out from her door across the hall. Her face was pale, her eyes dark with fear. She mouthed two words at me. "He's here." Sleep didn't come the next night. I didn't even try. I sat up in bed with my lamp on, staring at the wall as the minutes dragged past midnight. The air was heavy, thicker than usual, and the shadows felt alive. Hannah was across the hall. I could hear her tossing, muttering in her sleep. My parents' door was shut, but I knew they weren't resting either. Then it began. The knock. Not 3 this time. Not steady, it was frantic. Loud. Pounding at the front door so hard I swore the wood might splinter. Bink, bink, binge. I shot upright. My chest tightened as if someone had gripped my lungs. Hannah screamed. Within seconds, my parents burst out of their room. My dad, wild-eyed, grabbed a baseball bat from the closet. My mom clutched Hannah in her arms, trying to calm her, but Hannah's screams only grew louder. "He's inside!" she cried. "He's inside already!" The pounding at the door didn't stop. It grew louder, shaking the frame. Every thud echoed through the house, rattling the windows. Dad ran to the door. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice shaking. No answer. Just another deafening bang. He raised the bat and yanked the door open. The porch was empty. The yard lay still under the pale moonlight. The street was silent. But the air outside was ice cold. So cold that my father's breath plumed out in clouds. Then, from behind us came another sound, knocking. Not at the door. From inside the house. The walls shook with it, every surface alive with pounding. The ceiling, the floorboards, the hallway. Knock, 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 all around us, like dozens of fists hammering in unison. My mother shrieked. Hannah buried her face in her chest. I felt rooted to the spot, my ears ringing from the noise. Dad slammed the door shut and backed into the living room, holding the bat tight. "Stay together!" he shouted, his voice breaking. But the noise didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, until it wasn't just knocking, it was scratching. Nails raking along the walls, tearing through wood and plaster. We could hear them moving, darting from one end of the house to the other. Crawling, clawing, always just out of sight. And then the voices came. Low guttural whispers spilling from the walls like 100 mouths pressed against them. Too many to understand, overlapping and frantic, hissing words I didn't recognize. Hannah lifted her head, her face pale and wet with tears. "He says he's coming." The lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the house plunged into darkness. My mom screamed. My dad cursed, waving the bat wildly. I fumbled for my phone, the glow from the screen barely lighting the room. In that faint light, I saw something I'll never forget. A shadow moved across the wall, tall, twisted, not matching any of us. It bent unnaturally, its limbs too long, its head tilted as if listening. "Do you see that?" I whispered. Dad's face drained of color. "Get upstairs!" We stumbled up the stairs in chaos, the house still alive with knocking and scratching. Every step thudded beneath us, as if someone, or something, was following close behind. We slammed Hannah's door shut, huddling together in her small room. Dad pressed his back against the door, clutching the bat. For a moment the noises stopped. The silence was worse. We all held our breath, waiting, listening. Then came the scream. It started low, from somewhere deep in the house, and rose into a piercing shriek that shook the windows. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. The sound carried rage and hunger and something ancient. Hannah clamped her hands over her ears and sobbed. My mother whispered prayers under her breath. The scream cut off abruptly. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. I dared to whisper, "Dade, what is this?" His jaw clenched. He shook his head. "I don't know." That's when the door behind him shuddered. 3 knocks. Deliberate slow. Right against the wood he was leaning on. Knock. 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 Dad jumped back, his face pale, the bat slipping from his sweaty hands. The knocks came again, harder this time, rattling the frame. And then, for the first time, we all heard the voice. A deep, hollow whisper that seeped through the wood, filling every corner of the room. "Let me in." The voice at the door nearly stopped my heart. "Let me in." The words slid through the wood like smoke, curling around the room, wrapping tight around my throat. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The weight of it pressed into our chests, making it hard to breathe. My father scrambled back, his hands trembling. My mother clutched Hannah so tight the little girl whimpered against her chest. I sat frozen, every nerve screaming at me to move, but my body wouldn't obey. Then the door shuddered again. Bieng. Bieng. The sound rattled the frame, shook the pictures on the wall. It wasn't knocking anymore. It was pounding like a battering ram, each strike louder, more violent. Hannah buried her face against Mom's chest, sobbing. "Don't let him in! Please don't let him in!" Dad tried to shout back, his voice breaking. "Leave us alone!" The house answered with another scream, not one voice this time. Dozens. Hundreds. A chorus of shrieks rising from the walls, from the floors, from the ceiling itself. It was as if the whole house was alive and screaming in agony. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound pierced straight through me, vibrating in my skull until I thought I'd pass out, and then silence. The sudden absence of sound was worse than the noise. My ears rang, and the room felt heavy with something waiting. Watching. Dad finally whispered, "We're leaving." We scrambled to our feet. Mom carried Hannah, who clung to her like she was drowning. Dad led the way, bat raised, as we crept out of Hannah's room. The hallway was dark, the only light a faint glow of moonlight spilling through the upstairs window. We moved slowly, every step groaning beneath us. My heart hammered as I glanced down the stairwell. That's when I saw it. A figure stood at the bottom of the stairs, tall, thin, limbs too long, head tilted unnaturally to one side. Its body was nothing but shadow, darker than the darkness around it. I froze. "Dad." He turned, his eyes widening. He saw it too. The figure didn't move. It didn't speak. It just waited. Dad raised the bat, his arms shaking. "Stay behind me." Step by step, we crept down the stairs. Every creak sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The shadow didn't move, didn't flinch. But when we reached the bottom, it was gone. The front door stood closed. The living room lay empty. For a moment, hope sparked in me. Maybe we could make it out. Maybe it was over. Dad reached for the lock. His fingers barely brushed the knob before the door shook violently, as if someone on the other side was trying to tear it off its hinges. We screamed. Mom pulled Hannah back. The pounding grew louder, shaking the walls, rattling the windows, filling every corner of the house. And then the lights returned. All at once, the lamps flicked on, the TV buzzed to life, the refrigerator hummed. The sudden brightness was blinding. The pounding stopped. The house stood still. Dad turned the knob slowly, cautiously, and pulled the door open. Nothing. The street was quiet. The night air still. No shadow. No figure. Just the lonely hum of the streetlight at the corner. We all stood frozen, waiting, listening. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Finally, Dad closed the door. "It's over?" He whispered, more to himself than to us. "It's over." We tried to believe him. We sat in the living room the rest of the night, huddled together, every lamp blazing. Hannah eventually cried herself to sleep. My parents whispered in low, broken voices about moving, about leaving everything behind. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Because even though the house was silent, even though the walls no longer knocked or whispered, I could still feel it. That presence. Waiting, watching. It's been years since that night we did move. We left the house behind, boarded up and rotting. My parents never spoke about it again. Hannah refuses to. But I still wake up at midnight sometimes. Always at midnight. And when I do, I hear it, not in the walls, not at the door. Closer. Right beside my bed. Knock. Knock. Thank you for listening to this story on Midnight Hunt. If you felt the chill crawl up your spine tonight, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more true style horror stories that will keep you awake long past midnight. Until the next tale, keep your lights on and listen carefully. Because sometimes the knocks you hear are not just the house settling.